Okay, there we go. I think we're ready to go. All right, let's see. Whoops. Get to the slideshow. Okay, my first time running a Zoom. Thanks, everybody. My name is Sean Bryan, president of QuickRate, and as always, I'm pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us on this well, I guess in some parts rainy, windy Sunday morning. My name is Steve Huntington. I'm the director of analytics here. I've been working with community banks for my entire career, and more than half of that now has been with Sean, everybody here at QuickRate.
Thank you, Steve. Just a reminder, we will send out a link to the slides today, as well as a copy or a link to the recording. Throughout the presentation, certainly submit any questions you have through the Q&A feature or the chat feature, and we will take those at an appropriate pause in the presentation or at the end of the discussion. As per usual, we'll just start off with a few polling questions. These will be familiar to you. I thought today it would be just interesting to kind of recycle some questions that we asked this very same time a year ago, and just see how things may have changed over the last 12 months. So the first one was, are you experiencing deposit outflows at your institution? And so just a simple yes or no here. And we'll give this just a minute. Go ahead and this one. And 65% of you aren't, which is encouraging, and 35% are still seeing some leakage there. So yeah, we'll in a second compare those to how this looked 12 months ago. So let's go to the second one regarding reserves. Will you be increasing your reserve this quarter? Again, just a simple yes or no. And this one, 52% of you are not, 53% are not, and 47% are. Let me go ahead and share those results. And we'll move on to the next question here about past due loans. Are your past due loans higher or lower than this time last year? Higher, lower, about the same are our three choices there. And this one here. So 57% about the same, 30% say higher, and 6% lower. All right. And our final, oops, I guess I didn't stop sharing those. Final questions is, what concerns you most over the next 12 months? Liquidity, credit quality, AOCI adjustment, or loan demand? So again, we'll take a look at these responses and compare them to what we saw 12 months ago. And we'll see if I actually got to the right version of my presentation. Okay, let's see. Make a few notes here while I'm looking at these. So these are, pretty well, decidedly different, but meaningfully different, particularly around liquidity that we'll see here in a second. So thank you all again for participating in those questions. If we look at the one we just answered, what concerns us over the next 12 months? Again, these were the results from last year. Liquidity was a much higher proportion of concern. Today's it was only 33% of our attendees. Credit quality was 49% today, 34% a year ago. So an uptick there. And then loan demand had no concerns last year. Now we're 12% of us over the next 12 months see that. And AOCI was the same. So an interesting comparison. Past due loans, you can see last year 65% of us were about the same. This time around was 57%. Higher was 21%. This morning was 37%, and lower was 14% a year ago and 6% today. So again, a change there. Will you be increasing your reserve this quarter? 64% last year said no. To this morning, it was 52% or 53%. And 47 to 36 from a year ago. So again, just what a difference 12 months makes. And then probably the one that's probably most the biggest change is regarding experiencing deposit outflows. So last year, over half of our respondents on the Coffee Talk were seeing outflows. Today it was 65% and no 35%. So again, interesting just to see the difference that 12 months can make. And just a reminder, while as much as things feel the same oftentimes, or we can get kind of lulled into this the month after month, it is sometimes interesting to go back and just see how we thought about things just a short 12 months ago. So today, we thought we'll talk about a number of things, but as we get to the fourth quarter of the year, it's hard to believe we're closing in on the end of quarter 3 here. But I just think it's, throughout the year, we're looking at a number of things, but as we get into the fourth quarter, we start thinking about budgeting, maybe strategic planning. But we also just may want to just take a step back and just think about, reviewing our ACL policy and just kind of our process. Again, I think we've all done a tremendous job making the transition and really optimizing our processes. But I think that's again, a never-ending kind of process, right? We're always trying to improve it. So again, just might be the time to take a step back, look at our policy, see if there's any changes we need to make sure our policies are addressing roles and responsibilities, authority, how we're communicating, our results, discuss what our key inputs and assumptions are, and what's our format, right? Are we an institution who prefers a narrative, matrices, or, list things out? What does our board and our management, look to and best consume, are things all of us, thinking about just to make the discussion more meaningful and impactful. Certainly want to highlight any changes that may have occurred over the last 12 months or quarter to quarter. So again, just a way to be thinking about this. Again, I think it's important to look at what analytics are important to your institution. Everybody, focuses, we all focus on common things, but there may be, variables or metrics that your board and management team prefer to monitor more closely than others. Make sure we're in agreement. Thresholds for changes. At what point does your board want to be aware of any changes to Q factors? What's that threshold of change or even change to the reserve that we want to make sure, one, we both communicate, but two, just if we need to dig further into anything else. Our Q factor processes, again, I think this is an area that all of you are best equipped with to deal with at your institution. But again, I think just, considering things to try to make the process, more standardized or just more, easy for you to produce and for your board and management to consume are things, again, just always looking to try to fine tune any process you have. We're big believers in peer data. We're going to be making some enhancements to our peer pages, and we certainly currently have data out there. But again, as some of us I know don't use the peer data, but it just might be something to consider going forward. And then once you do decide to look at peer data, trying to really settle in on what's the most appropriate peer group or meaningful peer group for you to use, whether that's your UBPR, a state peer group, or one that's more localized and customized, either to your business style and plan, or maybe just your geography. Steve, any comments or anything on any of these topics that you want to touch on?
Not yet.
Okay. We did have a question, and I don't know that it came in clearly. Scott, if you wouldn't mind just retyping that one in. Oh, okay. What is the consensus for calculating specific impairments, fair market value or discount cash flows? I think for impairments, I think one of the things that CECL did for us as an industry, or FASB did, was they gave us a lot more flexibility in how we wanted to handle those types of impairments, right? There used to be in the ALLL world a very dictated way on how those are meant to be calculated. Now it's a little bit more free flowing to the bank, where again you can look at fair market value if you want to do discounted cash flows. It's really more in your wheelhouse of preference, just making sure you substantiate what it is and what methodology you chose to use, but they're not necessarily dictating how you have to address those. Steve, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, and for individually assessed loans, maybe ones that are, collateral dependent at this point, and you're more concerned with losses, and you split them, the risk is enough different or enough higher than the rest of the pool that you feel like you need to evaluate them individually. There is no consensus for how we calculate or estimate our losses on those individually assessed loans. That doesn't necessarily need to be very much different at all from what you've been doing in the past for those loans. The definition of what is impairment and exactly obviously has changed and is not as well defined now as it was under the old methodologies. But so I think it gives you probably, as much, if not more, flexibility now in how you handle those individual assessments.
Yeah, I think that's for me is the bottom line. There's just more flexibility here. Again, as Steve said, there's no definitive prescription on how you have to handle them. And our experience has been in talking to banks, a lot of times the auditors and regulators are, comfortable with what the bank has done historically, but also, recognizing that, sometimes to do the discounted cash flow analysis, was a lot more work that they've come to accept, more collateral and fair market value, methodologies as well. So, all right, let's keep moving on. Thanks again for the questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss any more here come in. Oh, no, I got them. Okay, let me just clear those out. So, right. Okay, so as per usual, just a reminder of some of the updates and enhancements that we've made to the tool. Again, none of these have infected the methodology or the calculations, but we are trying to be sensitive to any improvement or enhancement we've made to the tool. We're sharing with you on a regular basis. Steve's going to touch on a couple of these today that we've been working on, but Steve, if you want to jump in here and just talk about the new enhancements included.
Yeah, if you can go through the next couple slides, and then I think I'll share my screen for just a minute as well. So we've had the ability for a couple months now to auto populate your warms for you. If you are a warm one of our customers where we're calculating your warms for you, as soon as we finish the calculation, not only do we send you the spreadsheet with all the calculations in them, but directly in the tool itself. If you go down a couple slides, okay, so I'm going to do this backwards. Two more.
No,
and
which one do you want?
Yeah, one more past that. There we go. If you click on the pre-populate button, which is on the top of the warm column, you'll have the option to choose your own warm calculations if we've been doing it for you. If we are not calculating your warms, you'll still have two peer-based options. You'll be able to get pre-populate with warms coming from regulatory guidance or warms coming from median values from all of our hundreds of CECLSolver users. So if anyone has any questions with that, we're happy to walk you through it, but it was just a way to be a little bit more efficient, save you guys a little bit of time, and get rid of the risk of input errors, right? From all the data that we send you, or from the industry data that we have as available. So if you could back up now to the first of those, two new things that we just added in the last week. First one is a video resource library. So now you'll notice on all of our tabs in the CECLSolver, right there on the top right, I didn't circle it, but it says there's a helpful hints box. And inside that box, we'll have video clips taken from all the webinars that we've done, the coffee talks that we've done, and we've cleaned them up to provide little sort of video discussions and snippets of topics that are pertinent to each different part of the CECLSolver as you work your way through the tool. So there'll be a handful of hints on each tab. For the summary tab, we have hints of, a discussion of updating scenarios for the next period and kind of walking you through that. User management, access, and control. And this is a summary of all the different tabs on the CECLSolver and which videos are available for each one. So you can click on any one of those. It'll open up a new tab, and I'll show you in a couple minutes what those look like. They're very helpful. There's transcripts written in there with the videos as well. So hopefully that's something you guys, kind of a first line of defense. If you have a question about something you're working on in the tool, take a look at that video box right at the top for that screen and click on it if it's a topic that's pertinent to your question.
Great.
The next thing.
Hold on, Steve. We had a question come in. I was going to go ahead now. So we had a question come in to see a polling question concerning how many users have gotten an independent review of their calculation. So that's certainly one we've asked in the past, but we will make sure to include that in next month's coffee talk.
Yep.
All right.
The other thing that we've added just last week, we wanted to give all of you a little bit more, as much data as we can, not only about historical economic trends, but also about projections, right? So once a year, the Federal Reserve and the FDIC publish a very large, overly verbose manuscript on stress test scenarios for the larger DFAST institutions. So instead of you guys having to go through and dig through that dense 100-page manual there that doesn't really apply to community banks, we thought just pulling out the economic data, historical trends, and also sort of a baseline scenario, which a baseline scenario is sort of the median for all the economists that the FDIC and the Fed use to project the next 3 years going forward for some of these most important critical economic trends. And then there's a severely adverse scenario. So the baseline is kind of middle of the road actual projections. The severely adverse scenario, they are not projections per se, they are just a punitive scenario, right? A hypothetical, overly punitive scenario that they wanted the largest banks to recalculate losses under these punitive scenarios. So you have the option of looking at the historical trends quarterly, going back 15 or 20 years, or and a baseline scenario, which is kind of the consensus projections at this point in time going forward, or the severely adverse scenario. So let me go ahead and share my screen now, Sean, so I can show a couple of those things in. All
right. You should be able to take it.
Yep. Looks like that's available now. So first thing you'll notice here on all of our pages, there are the helpful hints for videos, and on each tab of a tool, they're different ones. So when you're working with a historical analysis, obviously a discussion of a lifetime look back multiplier or how to customize look back periods would be pertinent. When you're looking at Q factors, a discussion of unallocated reserves. Some of these are the discussions that we had when we've had accountants and auditors here on our coffee talks with us. As far as individually assessed loans, a discussion of impaired loans. Let's say I wanted to get more about that. I click on this video. It's going to open up a new tab, and the website is called Loom, which is a great website for these types of videos. So you can click right on the video here. You can there we go. You can get a summary. You can leave a comment on it. You can actually even click on the transcript here and follow along. I'm going to mute it, but I'm going to do this. So as you can see here, as we're going through you're listening to the video, it's actually following along with the transcript here, so you can read what we're talking about, and you can even copy some text and use that. So it's a great resource for those types of things. If I close that back out, I'm back on the page. And if I click on the header here, it's going to open up a little pop-up, which gives you just sort of a sorted list of all of those video resources that we have right now. The clips could be anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes to 10 to 12 minutes long, depending upon the topic and how much how verbose I'm being at any given time. Yeah, we will add to this certainly as we go along here, as we get new clips and new discussions about these topics. Hopefully that'll be helpful for everybody. And if I click on the knowledge base, and that tab opens up, here we have a brand new button for the FDIC stress testing economic scenarios. So I open up that. That's what we were just discussing here. So now we can go back in time and we can go this is something they update once a year. So the historical stuff will go through the end of last year, and they updated in mid-February. So mid-February next year, you can take a look, and then you'll see all of 2024 in the history. So we have, GDP growth, income growth, unemployment, CPI, inflation, yields and rates, prime rate, and then just some of the index levels, right? Dow Jones, the housing price index, Case-Shiller, commercial real estate, and market volatility. And if I click on any one of these, it's just going to give me the exact definition of what that line item is, what the series is from the Federal Reserve, and where the data is coming from. This is the historical. If I click on the baseline of the severely adverse, you'll notice now the first data point is the first quarter of this year. So these are projections moving forward for all through the first quarter of 2027. So we have 3 years worth of projections. Again, the baseline scenario is a standard kind of middle of the road projection. The severely adverse is red colored there because it is not a projection. It is more an adverse hypothetical scenario. Just want to be clear on the difference between those two. So hopefully that data can be helpful when you guys are considering qualitative factor adjustments and wanting to integrate not only historical trends, economic trends, and how they've correlated with your loss experience, but also maybe some projected economic trends, and doing that without having to leave the tool to get the data. I believe that's all that I wanted to show there. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to you, Sean.
Okay. All right.
Or maybe not. Maybe
There. Okay.
Maybe it's still gonna be me.
Yeah. So Steve touched on the warm values. I think that's been moving, been received pretty well. So if you have any questions on that, certainly reach out to us. Certainly as we get ready to prepare warms after the third quarter, just know again, if we're preparing them for you, once they're completed, you'll be able to download those, or excuse me, upload those. We'll upload those right into the CECLSolver on your behalf. Just a reminder of that slide we covered. And so now, again, I think what we're trying to do increasingly, as we mentioned at the top, I think we've all transitioned well. So now we're really into more of optimizing. Thank you, Connie, for that kind words. Just giving you more data, right? We, the economic trends are just another way to try to, again, complete or add more robustness, give more context. The user data, I think, we have begun throughout the year, and Steve continues to add. So he thought today we just kind of share some of the preliminary trends we're seeing with the Q3 data. So Steve, take it away.
Yeah, well, first we'll talk here on my slide, and that's I guess I'll go back to sharing my screen again. This is something we shared with you guys last month, just to give you a feel for. We had a lot of questions once we started sharing our user data trends, right? Our internal user data trends, because if we had 10 or 15 institutions using the CECLSolver, that is not a large enough data set by any means to really gather any significant industry-wide or national trends in these metrics. But since we have over 325 different unique community banks actively using the tool from, I think it's 42 states now. Yep. Alaska, we're still coming for you. And institutions range from, our smallest customers are newer institutions that only have 15, 20 million in assets. And we have larger community banks that have over $4 billion in their portfolio using the tool. And they average around $400 million in assets. So about half bigger, half smaller than that. Our users have run over 4,200 complete scenarios with over 90,000 segment level data points for warms, Q factors, and ACL levels. So that's just to kind of press the point that it is a very robust data set that significant trends can be identified from using. So if you head to the next slide, that's where we find it, right? If you go to the knowledge base, we're going to be making it more obvious and easier to get to in the next, I believe in the next month or so. We're going to add a new tab to the main page so you can get to some of this data a little bit easier because we have so many people looking for it. It's still kind of hidden a little bit in here on the knowledge base, but if you click on the peer data, it's not just medians now, you're going to get this. So this is a screenshot. This is not updated for Q3, but I'm about to share my screen in a minute and it will be. But this is how you use that tool. You can click on warms or Q factors or collectively assessed reserve levels. And you can look at median values, or you can click on 25th or 75th percentile. The great thing about that is, let's say you're looking at mortgage loans and you want to see the trend in Q factors for across the country. You not only see kind of where the average bank is going, typical community bank is going at the segment level for their Q factors, but also kind of that range, right? That 25th to 75th percentile range. Because when it comes to reserves, certainly everyone is a bit of a unique snowflake, and right, your reserve level is going to have a lot of characteristics that are unique to your institution. But we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't think that comparing ourselves to peers and having a higher comfort level, and our examiners having a higher comfort level with our reserve when it approaches or exceeds peer medians is not of critical importance, right? In defending and justifying your reserve level. So not just looking at the median, but knowing where the 25th and 75th percentile are so that you're within a reasonable range, right? But at the segment level for each individual segment of your portfolio, not just for your portfolio as a whole, we thought would be very helpful. So this is updated with the second quarter, even though the third quarter is not quite over yet. Our next coffee talk, our next webinar is at the beginning of November. And so during the filing period next month, we're not gonna have shared additional Q3 data for you or with you, right? But since we don't have to wait for call reports to be filed, these are the scenarios that all of you have been running collectively throughout the entire third quarter, except for the last 3 days of it. We can share that data at any point in time, and we can give you sort of, very much leading trends that haven't even been released publicly from a call report perspective yet, that can hopefully give you a head start on reconsidering Q factors and double checking your warms and the direction your warms are going in compared to peer data even before the call reports are filed. So we thought that would be helpful. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen one more time here.
Yep. You should be able to take it.
Oh, there we go. Screen 2. All right, I believe it's there now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the knowledge base, and I'm going to head over to the peer data. It's going to open up a new tab. I know it's a bunch of tabs that gets open, but we thought that was all right. So here we go. Updated as of this morning, we have the third quarter less the last 4 days of September, and we can see what those trends are. So these are our warms. And we can see, the red values just mean that they decline from the previous quarter, and the green values mean that they increase some from the previous quarter. We just want to give you guys as many visual cues as possible. And I think it's important, again, not just to look at what the median has been doing, but when people are at the higher end of the range and lower end of the range, what those trends are looking like as well. So we saw an overall, if I just look at the whole portfolio total loans, we've been seeing slight declines in warms on each quarter for the past few quarters, and that sort of makes sense to us. But if I click on, let's say, 75th percentile, You see here at the 75th percentile, we've seen some increase in warm levels, and at the 25th percentile. So as I toggle through here, all the data points here change, right? From lower values to higher values. But this chart here, which obviously shows all three of them simultaneously, does not change. But we can go through and kind of keep a track on that. Here's Q factors. So I'm looking at qualitative factor adjustments. Median Q factor adjustments have declined. In the third quarter, we saw a little bit of a dip after an increase in the second quarter. In fact, we've been seeing some slight increases in Q factors over the last 3 quarters, but not in the third quarter of this year. And there's a lot of contributing factors that could go into. I'm not gonna spend too much time opining on exactly why Q factors might be slightly declining across the board. But keep in mind that Q factors are a relative adjustment from your historical experience, right? So let's say hypothetically you've seen, well, not hypothetically, we know, but data shows it, right? Past due loans and credit issues have been creeping up and increasing across the community banking space for the last few quarters. I think in the question at the beginning, Sean, more a year ago, a third of you said your biggest concern was credit quality, and now that's 15 basis points, right? Almost half. And so your concerns are not unfounded, and the asset quality data in loans past due and non-accrual loans, and starting to see a little increase in net charge-offs. Obviously, that's the end of the road. You're going to see increases in past dues and non-accruals well before you see the increase in net charge-offs. But we're seeing increases across the board. And if you think about your reserve value from a CECL standpoint, it is your historical experience plus or minus your Q factor adjustments. We haven't seen much of a change of an increase in actual loan loss reserves. So if our historical experience is coming higher and our end result of reserves is staying the same, where's the difference? It means Q factors have actually had to come down a little bit in order to have higher historical losses and no change in reserves. It means our Q factors have come down a little bit as an industry. And that's kind of what we see here. So that's my best guess as to why we've seen some slight decreases in Q factors, because you've been seeing some losses, but they were expected losses. So now they're no longer a Q factor adjustment. They're actually in your historical experience. And but it leads to a reserve that really hasn't changed very much, or actually slightly come down a little bit. We've been seeing increases in declines in credit quality, and at the same time, slight declines in reserve levels across the industry. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the next couple quarters. So here are the Q factors. And if I click on the reserve levels, keep in mind, these are collectively assessed reserve levels, right? So these don't include the individually assessed loans separately, but we certainly have not seen an increase in reserve levels in the community banking industry. In the third quarter, we actually saw a slight a decline, a 6 basis point decline in median reserve levels for our 325 plus community banks using the tool. And that's happening at the 75th percentile median, kind of across the board. So that's interesting and feeds into the discussion I was just having, where we've seen Q factors have also come down. This data is also accessible if you want to pull it into an Excel environment and do something else with it. That's fine, but we thought this would be a helpful way to look at this, and we wanted to make sure that it's updated. So we'll be updating it probably before even the end of the filing period each quarter, because we know it can be really helpful during your filing process, right? When you do your preliminary ACL calculations in early October, without the benefit of all of this peer call report data and trends being kind of finalized yet from an industry standpoint, we wanted to give you some industry data before the gun, so to speak. Sean?
Great. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and as Steve said, I think, we also see, I know we see banks using that as, again, part of their packet that they're sharing, with their board as well. So, again, I think it's an area where we are going to continue to focus, just trying to bring you, more real world data to, again, even if it's just directionally or context or support for what you're doing, we hope we can find a way to benefit from it. So we're going to try to find more areas where we can incorporate data. Hopefully that's helpful.
I added one more slide in there, Sean.
I'm
If
gonna
you want
go
to
back.
pull back the
Yep.
presentation, something that I thought would be a good topic to discuss for a few minutes if we had some time, and it looks like we
Yeah.
do. This is something that we get a lot. We just had a conversation about it yesterday with a customer, and interestingly, from a conceptual standpoint, it touches on the exact topic that I was just discussing, right? So we have institutions that'll call us, and we're discussing their reserve levels and their recent exam, and they'll say, we just had a significant loss. We just had a charge off in one of our segments of the portfolio in this past quarter, and my examiners are asking me where that is in my, I need to account for that in my reserves. Do I need to increase my reserve level because my recent charge-offs have bumped up across the board, or because I had one significant loss in the recent past? And I'd say, just like so much else in CECL, it's subjective. The answer is it depends. CECL is all about projecting estimate. It's expected credit losses, right? But it's future, looking out towards the future, and not just this year, but over an extended period of time, over a cyclical period of time, and estimating what losses there might be for the remainder of the life of my portfolio going forward. So just because you had a recent loss in your portfolio does not necessarily mean you need to end up with a higher reserve now as a result of it. As long as that loss or that pattern of losses that's recently, let's say, increased, is something that you expected, right? If it was something that you had baked into your qualitative factor adjustments, and now let's say the historical component of your reserve is higher, right? The A plus B equals C. Historical experience plus changes, Q factors, equals expected loss equals reserve. If my historical component has come up some, but those were already baked into my Q factor adjustments, we should be absolutely reevaluating our qualitative factor adjustments and potentially bringing them down, to say that, I had a huge Q factor, I had 0 in my losses historically. I had a huge Q factor adjustment because there was some concern at my own institution or in the industry about potential losses in this segment. I've now realized some of that. So that burden has shifted to the historical. So now I don't need quite as much of a Q factor adjustment because like I said, I've now realized some of those losses historically. Some might argue that, well, aren't you just sort of hiding that? You're hiding that loss. Well, no, your historical experience plays just as much of a role in your reserve calculation as your Q factors. So it's completely justifiable to shift that extra 20 basis points that you added in the historical out of the Q factor and end up with a reserve that's exactly the same as it was before the loss, as long as those losses were something that you had anticipated. And this is where the points for paper really comes in, right? Making detailed notes about your qualitative factor adjustments and what they're based upon is what's going to give you that safe landing spot if you were to employ a decrease in the Q factors because of a historical loss that you've just recently experienced. Sean, any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a great point, because this is a very common question. Again, I think documenting the process is important, but again, I think it's again one of those subtle, real changes from the ALLL approach to the CECL approach. Is that we're trying to be in front of these things, and so when we actually incur the loss, it's not as per se disadvantageous as maybe we felt, or impactful as back in the ALLL days, because hopefully we've been out in front of it with our Q factors, and then can adjust accordingly once the charge off has actually occurred.
Exactly.
All right. So let's just open it up to any other questions that all of you may have today. A little bit shorter presentation. Again, next month we will certainly be after the quarter, so we'll have Paul Allen join us from Saltmores to take questions. But again, if you have anything on your mind, go ahead and share that. Just a reminder of the videos. For those of you, we continue. If you haven't taken us up on our free trial, I know we say this every month, but I think we continue to build some really, really interesting and helpful insights and functionality into our IntelliCredit portfolio analyzer. So I really would encourage you to take us up on our 6-month trial. Again, I think there's just a number of ways it can benefit not only your loan administration, but also even your process for CECL, particularly getting down to more granular information about your loan portfolio. So again, look for future webinars on this. We really we'll have even a more exciting component added to this after the first of the year. But again, I'd really encourage you to take a look at this. Question came in: any update on changing the summary to include the GL balance compared to the model versus recent history change? I think, Steve, we have, on our summary page, we just show change over change from the tool, but not necessarily incorporating their change from what their GL was. So we may follow up with you and then just kind of revisit that and talk through, make sure, see how we can best kind of incorporate that into the summary page.
Yeah, I believe by default, when on the summary page where we're just sort of comparing what the current scenario that you're building suggests that you need versus a point in time historically, by default, you can choose any quarter end period in the past, right? It'll default to the most recent quarter, but you can click on that date and there's a drop down and you can choose any older date. So you can compare your current scenario values versus the end of last year or the end of last quarter. Or I believe that you can, let me check here. I'm gonna head back to the summary for 1 second. I'll see if I can share. Actually, let me go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, I'll say,
we can
take the
discuss it for
screen,
just a
Steve.
second.
Yeah.
I'm doing it hypothetically, but
You don't
got
need
it
to.
right in my screen.
Yeah,
I don't need
you don't
to.
need to.
All right, here we go. So yeah, when I pull up the tool, it's a little bit confusing because we have our current scenario. Of course, this is a scenario I have not built out yet. And then it's compared to recent historical data and the date is the same, right? So, but let's say I build out a new scenario here and this is as of, 9/30/24. Of course, we can't do that yet, but I'm just making some assumptions here. And I'm just going to change a couple little things here. All right. What I get is, so my current scenario, let's say it's as of 9/30, and by default, I'm comparing it to the call report data from the last available quarter. But I can click on this and say, hey, I want to compare it to the end of last year. When I do that, these values just updated to be what they were at the end of last year. So this differential here of this change over time is what your current scenario would suggest as of whatever date your current scenario is as of versus that historical period. Now you'll notice that these balances here are all overridable. So if you do this on a monthly basis and you're running a scenario right now as of 9/30 and you want to compare it to what you did at, let's say, August 31st, you can come in here and just say, all right, well, it's not available from the call report. So I can type in August 31st and I can plug in whatever balances I want here. So you can override these to be your GL from a month earlier, so that if you like to use this period over period change calculation. So that's the way we have it now. There's no way in this drop-down box to automatically choose the data from a previous scenario that you saved, right? Let's say you ran a scenario from a month ago. There's no way to choose the data from a previous scenario. It's simply as of a previous call report date, or you can override and manually plug in your GL balances from, let's say, August 31st and compare it to your current scenario if your current scenario is as of, let's say, September 30th. So that's the way it works right now.
Great. But yeah, Nate, we'll follow up to see if there's something more we can do there. All right. Again, just a couple of reminders of upcoming webinars. Again, next month, we have a stress testing webinar hosted by IntelliCredit, and a household and just kind of deposit loan gathering webinar presented by Infusion. We did have another question come in here. When we are determining Q factors, is there any information through QuickRate we can utilize as supporting documentation to demonstrate how we ended up at that value? So I think the most information that we have is one, obviously the peer and the normative data Steve just covered. We do have the Q factor matrix, which can help you kind of standardize your approach and kind of give you a basis for change each quarter. Again, that's found in the knowledge base. So I would say, Steve, those are the two probably most direct things we can use for
And
support.
the historical economic
Yeah.
data that we've always had, and then the new economic data with projections going forward that we just implemented last week. So while your Q factor adjustments certainly have to be based upon your own internal proprietary data, the trends that we can show that can help you justify what direction those Q factors are headed in, we have a good bit of that. Not only looking at your historical loss experience in that particular segment, comparing it to an economic trend, comparing it to a peer median, and also the range of a 25th and 75th percentile for the peers, and what direction the economic data points gone in, what direction the peer trend has gone in, and all that can help you justify if you've made a change in the direction of your qualitative factor adjustments up or down on a relative basis, right? Because Q factors are all about, they're 100% relative to the historical experience you've had and to the previous quarter.
Oasis, again, if you want to discuss that further, just reach out to your sales rep. We can certainly get a time to discuss that in greater detail. And Travis, yeah, we will reach out to you to schedule a call as well. All right, let's see if I missed anything. We are inputting our GL into recent historical to compare GL to model currently. Issue is just the header, recent historical data. It would be nice to have current scenario, current GL, and historical data. Got it. Okay. Yeah, Nate, we will take that into account, and then, like I said, circle back with you if we come up with some presentations. We'll have you take a look at. All right. Thank you all for those questions today. Again, just a reminder, in the upcoming webinars, we'll be back in November with our next coffee talk. Again, Paul Allen from Saltmarsh will join us. I'd certainly encourage you to, again, register for all of our webinars. Even if you don't attend, you'll get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. So there's always an advantage to making sure you at least register. Again, we'll be back in November with Paul for the next coffee talk. And if there aren't any additional questions, Steve, any final words before we let everybody off to their day and weekend?
Nope, just look forward to some additional little enhancements that we're going to make over the next month that'll help organize better the tabs on the CECLSolver and add in some even more data. And please, if you have any data sources that you guys like to use that you think is helpful from an economic standpoint or a Q factor standpoint, or any templates that you're familiar with that you think are helpful in presenting this to the board, we would love to see some of that and consider something, whether it's we can even add to the tool going forward. So much of the stuff that you see here in our tool really has come from a lot of our user input and seeing how you all are using the tool in the wild, so to speak, and using that to drive what we develop moving forward. And we'd like to continue doing it that way.
Perfect. Well, again, on behalf of Steve, thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us for this month's coffee talk. Hope you have a great day and weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks again, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.